So we are now live. My name is Drew Dyson, co-executive director of ChangeTN, here with another conversation series with two more great candidates. We have Jenn Foley, who is running for State House District 65, and Torrey Harris, who is running for State House District 90. So to open it up, I'm going to go ahead and let the candidates talk a little bit about their races, why they're running, where their districts are, and what their platform consists of. So first, I'll turn it over to Jenn.
Thanks, Drew. I'm so thrilled to be here with you and Torrey, and I appreciate the support that Change Tennessee has given to me in my campaign. So I'm running for office in District 65, which is Williamson County. It's the southern and western part of Williamson County. So that includes parts of Franklin, Spring Hill, Thompson Station, Fairview, and Leapers Fork. It's a really interesting slice of Williamson County because it includes some of the downtown areas, as well as, middle class suburbs and the more rural parts of Williamson County. And I'm running because my family and I live in Spring Hill. We've moved here 5 years ago, like many families do, for the high quality schools that we have here. We are very fortunate that we have such wonderful, caring teachers and a school board and school administrators that work so hard for our kids. But I've just become increasingly frustrated with how every single year it's a fight over funding in our county. And the schools are driving a lot of growth. We have almost unchecked growth really in our county. And every year our schools are rezoned, so it throws neighborhoods and families into turmoil. And I just think there needs to be more support from the state level for our public schools and giving our teachers the raises that they deserve. I've also just felt like the state legislature is prioritizing big business and special interests rather than the people of Tennessee. And I think we need more voices of women and moms and people who are caring about our public schools and the middle class in the state legislature. So my legislative priorities are based on, my experiences as a working mom and trying to juggle a career, finding affordable, high quality childcare. And of course, my kids are in public schools. And I also came from a rural part of Tennessee when we moved here, Hickman County, which is out further west. And so I understand how much of a challenge it is to live in beautiful rural communities that don't have access to broadband internet and high quality healthcare. So those are some of the priorities that I would like to focus on once I'm up in Nashville.
Perfect. Yeah, definitely different priorities than what the other members on the other side of the aisle are fighting for up in Nashville.
Yeah.
So Torrey, tell us a little bit about your campaign, where your district is, and why you decided to run.
Yeah, so I'm Torrey Harris, and I am the Democratic nominee for Tennessee House District 90, which is located in Memphis, covering Midtown Memphis, parts of North Memphis, parts of South Memphis, and parts of Frazier. We are considered to be one of the most diverse districts in the entire state, and one of the most gerrymandered districts in the entire state. And so I am so happy to be able to go up for a representation for this district. I've been in this district for so long. I've kind of just know the ins and outs of my community. I talk to the people in the community, and we just aren't satisfied. We haven't had anybody who represented us in so long. We finally have an opportunity now to finally get someone that will listen, empower, and serve not just some, but all of our district and all of the members of Tennessee. And so I'm excited about that part. And this district, obviously, I ended up running in 2018. I lost by about 10% of the votes to the current incumbent who is in office right now. And so when I lost, I didn't give up. I actually went harder. I kind of got to know a lot more about what's going on in our community, what people actually care about, the little things that get overlooked when it comes to our legislature. I got an opportunity to do all of that and still do it now. And so I'm extremely involved in what's going on and connected to our community. I'm really, really passionate about public education. My mother's a teacher. I came up in public education. And so I want to see fully funded public education. Not to take away from private schools or charters or anything, but we do have to take care of our public schools and make sure that they are fully funded before we think of other avenues in education. I also believe that our criminal justice system is, for lack of better words, is torn apart. And so I think for me, I would love to see cash bail eliminated in the state of Tennessee. That is going to be something that I work extremely hard towards because I work in human resources. So I see people all the time who unfortunately get pulled over. They had a suspended license, they get taken to jail, they have a cash bail. So what happens? They lose their job because they've been in jail too long. They can't take care of their families. They can't take care of their children. And so cash bail holds us up on so much for progression for people in this state. So I want to fight for that. Healthcare is very important to me. I definitely want to fight for that. I have family members that go through tremendous health issues, but because we don't have the care that we need in the state of Tennessee, they're continuing to suffer both physically and financially. And so those are some of the major things that I really will be fighting for and that I really care about. And I look forward to dialoguing throughout the rest of this conversation.
Perfect. Yeah, I think District 90 deserves a Democrat who will actually fight for democratic values. So we're glad to have you running down there. So I want to go ahead and kick it off. So Wednesday is going to be the first day of early voting in the state. And it came out this week that Tennessee has a record number of registered voters now, totaling almost 4.4 million people. That's 24% higher than 2016. And that's about almost 830,000 more registered voters than we had in this time in 2018. So I want to get both of your opinions on this. How do you think this is going to affect down ballot races like your all's? Typically, we see the more people that actually turn out and vote, the better Democrats do. So Torrey, I want to throw this one to you first.
Yeah, so I personally believe that we need to get as many people registered for sure. I'm so happy to see the number increase from what it has been in the past. For someone I live in a majority Democratic district. So that obviously it looks good and it helps our area, but it really will help the entire state of Tennessee, because what happens is people who just registered, when they go to vote, those are very secure Democrats going to the polls for a reason. A lot of them got involved or decided to register because they weren't happy with what they see going on in our nation. A lot of those people who got registered were people who had some type of criminal background or whatnot, and now they've been able to finally get their voting rights back, which is something that we all need to be fighting for. And so I think this is going to be an exciting opportunity for us to finally get to a place where Democrats can break the supermajority. At one point, Tennessee was very blue. And so we can get back there. It's going to take some time, but we can definitely get there. And it's going to continue to take people making sure that others are registered. And so I'm excited to see the number increase the way it has. And I can't wait to see as many people at the polls come Wednesday. Hopefully everyone does early voting.
Yeah, I would definitely encourage anyone watching this, make sure you have a plan to vote and make sure you go and vote early. So Jenn, I want to kind of turn this question to you. You're in a much larger district, a much more rural district, but there's going to be more people now that are newly registered, newly young voters that are registered now in your district. How has that shift kind of been for you, and have you been noticing that while you've been campaigning?
Yeah, I have. And it's really interesting because you both are probably aware that in 2016, Tennessee ranked 49th in the country in voter turnout, which is just horrendous. I can't believe that, we're not all participating in our democracy. And it also means, though, that Tennessee is not a red state, it's a non-voting state, and we all have to remember that. But looking back on previous voting records for the past few years, especially during a presidential election in my district, there's about a 10,000 vote discrepancy between the amount of people who cast a ballot for the president and the amount of people who cast a ballot for their state representative. So it's really important that everyone studies their ballot. There's lots of resources online now with the GoVoteTN app. You can, put in your address and see exactly what your ballot is supposed to look like and who your candidates are. So I've been in that position where I walk into the polls and then there's offices on the ballot that I have no idea what these people do and what this role is. So it's important that we are all encouraging all of our family and friends to research your ballot. And make sure that you're voting in the down ballot races, because they have a more significant impact on our lives than the presidential race does. I'm really encouraged by the fact that we've had, a lot of growth, a lot of people moving into this district from all over the country, although some of them are moving from, conservatives moving from California to Tennessee, but there's also been a lot of young people registering. I think the latest figure I saw is that since the primary election in August, we've had 9,000 newly registered voters just in Williamson County. That's not just my district, but all 3 districts in the county, which I think is phenomenal. And I'm really encouraged as I'm out and about, seeing how many young people are paying attention now. I feel like so old saying that, but a lot of newly registered voters who are voting for the first time, they're really paying attention. We've actually even had peaceful protests, for racial justice here in Williamson County, which a few years ago, Williamson has the reputation of being a GOP stronghold, but a few years ago, you might not have even thought that was possible. But people are waking up to some of the social injustices and inequities in our state and in our nation and paying attention to those issues. And I think they're ready and excited to vote for candidates who are going to help make some changes here in Tennessee. So fingers crossed.
Yeah. Yeah. And you brought up something interesting that I actually had written down that I wanted to get your all's opinion on. You talked about down ballot races being much more important than those at the top of the ticket. However, most times you always hear it stressed that, whoever's at the top of the ticket is going to help those down ballot races. Do you all see that way? I've always gotten the feeling that it's your down ballot candidates that excite people to actually go to the polls and then focus more on, who's at the top of the ticket. Jen, I want to get your opinion on that.
That's a real tough one, I think, especially for my race, because so many people do know my opponent and respect him. He's served in the military. He's done a lot of great work in the community, and I appreciate his service as well. So even Democrats will say, "Oh, Sam Whitson, he's a nice guy." So I'm not really sure. I think a lot of people are really ready to get rid of, the current occupant of the White House. I'm hoping that the down ballot races are going to, they're going to pay attention to those as well. I have actually spoken to a few former Republicans who say they are voting blue all the way down, though. So it's 2020. This year's crazy. We don't know what to expect. We'll see.
Yeah. And Torrey, kind of to you on this, people know you're representative as well, and it's kind of the opposite down there. So how do you feel that, top-down approach over bottom-up approach? Which one do you think actually helps people more when they're running for office?
Yeah, so to me, I believe that the closer to home, the more people know. So because we're on the local level, people actually get an opportunity to talk to us. And I used it as an example the other day. Me and Jen, we're making our own calls to raise money. We're having to call people and say, "Hey, will you donate this?" The people running for president don't have to do that. They have people working for them, or someone sees it online and they just make a donation. So it's a lot easier for them. So we have to do a lot of the groundwork to where we're having conversations with people. So people know us a little bit closer than they would know someone from the top of the ticket. So I think it's much more important for people to vote up and down the ballot, but definitely your local state House, state Senate, your Congress, all those local seats really need the attention. And Jen mentioned it earlier, there is definitely a difference in the gap between the people that go out and vote for a presidential candidate versus what they vote for House seats. And so a lot of times people just don't necessarily know what it is that we will be doing in those seats. And so they don't necessarily just vote for those if they don't know the information. And so I think that is very important. We have to keep educating people on why they should vote all the way up and down the ballot. Don't waste your vote by just going in and clicking this one name. Mm-hmm. Go make sure you go down, click on Marquita Bradshaw, go all the way down, vote for your your congressman. Go all the way down, vote for your senator, state senator, state house, whatever's on the ballot, vote all the way through. Don't leave anything unblanked. So to me, yeah, I think that it is more important. And so we have to keep on pushing the knowledge out there, letting people know what it is that we're doing, what this position actually means, and how it really truly affects the lives of everyone daily.
Yeah. And before we kind of switch topics, I've got one more question I want to ask you all. Jenn, you mentioned that we were 49th in voter turnout. We are actually 48th now. We've improved slightly. But, that's still awful. I mean, we're ranking at the bottom. We're not getting people to turn out. I think, looking at it, average voter turnout ranks somewhere in the mid to low 30s, depending on the election. Certain cities, certain municipalities and certain counties do a lot better than others. But what as a legislature would you all like to see done to increase voter turnout? Torrey, I'll start with you on this.
I think that we should do automatic voter registration. You should automatically be registered to vote. There shouldn't be a process that is suppression. Voter suppression is registration. And so it should just automatically happen. You should automatically, as soon as you turn of age, it should automatically have you registered. They also have the dumping process where they go through and they dump people out of the voting system. Shouldn't happen that way. People should have the opportunity to vote. I think that will help push even further, getting people out to the polls where they don't have to go through another process to vote. I think that this year, COVID has shown us that mail-in ballots are needed, that everyone should have access to it regardless of circumstances. And I think now we'll see some changes eventually, but voter registration being automatic is something that we definitely have to do in the state of Tennessee.
Yeah, absolutely. Jenn, what would you like to see done?
I'd like to see absentee ballot drop boxes so that they don't have to be mailed in and they can be easily dropped off at, several locations throughout your county. I'd like for people's voting rights to be reinstated automatically once they've served their time for felons, for former felons. I think it's just because, especially if you've served your time and you've, paid your dues to society, you should not lose your right as a citizen of this country. So I would like to see that. I'd like to see student IDs be able to be used. There's some question about that in some areas. That disenfranchises some of our youngest voters. So we want them to be lifetime voters, right? Let's not discourage them right from the get-go by giving them hoops to jump through about what IDs they can show. And yeah, I think that's part of it. And everything that Torrey said too, I'm completely on board with. So that there's a lot of work we can do to make sure that people are participating. And I think also part of it is, we're not teaching civics in schools that much anymore, so people don't pay attention to our democracy and how our government should function. I think also that people maybe they're not turning out because they haven't been excited about who's on the ballot. But when I look at the roster of Democrats running across the state this year, I am really excited. I think they represent more Tennesseans' life experiences, and people can sorry, I'm having a people can identify with more of their candidates that are on the ballot because they represent themselves, those people. So yeah, I hope we've got work to do, but I hope we're going to see the tide start to turn here in Tennessee.
Yeah, and I mean, Torrey's mentioned this already. You don't have to go back too long to find out when Tennessee was a blue state. And we've had this problem with voting, and I think there has to be something done, whether it's apathy towards just not enough Democrats running, or not knowing who to vote for. I think something's got to change in order to begin to change the state. So kind of switching topics now, I want to bring up criminal justice because that's going to be a very important issue this November. We've seen these social movements from the Black Lives Matter groups and protests around the country after the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. I'm curious if this has helped to shape your all's view on criminal justice, or has changed your views at all, or what policies now you'd like to advocate for at the state level? Jen, and I'll start with you.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And the racial injustices in our legal system, I've always been aware of. I've studied anthropology, so part of what we study is how social systems impact people's behavior and impact people differently. And so yeah, I've always been aware of it, but it's brought all of these issues, all of these incidents have brought things into sharper focus for me. And I've learned more in doing research about what sorts of policies we can enact at the state level that can make a difference. One easy thing, which my opponent voted against, is community oversight boards. The GOP-led legislature took away the subpoena power for Nashville's, or it was aimed at Nashville, but any kind of community oversight board.
Knoxville lost theirs also.
Yeah, so it was that legislation, I think, that was passed in 2018 that my opponent voted for, that took away the bite of community oversight boards. And I think there's two separate but related issues. We have to make sure that interactions between the public and police are safer, and we also have to look at sentencing guidelines and why people are being put in prison, because we have some of the highest prison population in the country. And actually, Drew, in your area, it's growing higher, and a lot more women are being sent to prison for drug-related offenses. And so decriminalizing marijuana is one thing, but also, this seems like it wouldn't be related, but expanding Medicaid is one way to reduce our prison populations, because a lot of those drug and alcohol addiction related offenses are putting people in prison. And if we had expanded Medicaid and there were more behavioral treatment programs available to people, it might keep them out of jail and out of prison. So here we see that the Republicans seem to be so focused on the economy, but they're not paying attention to how our health, our education, and crime are all related, are all interrelated, and impact our economy as well. So yeah, that's just, I could go on and on and on, but I want to give Torrey a chance to talk too. But those are just some ideas I have to start the process of helping to reform our criminal justice system here.
Yeah, Torrey, so I want to get your thoughts on this also. Criminal justice reform, does your plan look any different before the incidents of George Floyd, or has it progressed more? What do you think is the biggest need that we need right now in Tennessee?
Yeah, so I feel like for the most part, everything has stayed the same for me, because the issues that we were dealing with and that have come to light now are the same issues we were dealing with before Breonna Taylor, before George Floyd passed away. And so we just have to make sure that now that the light is on them, that we are working towards correcting those mistakes and those issues. We have a senator who actually from Memphis, who is working towards making sure that we have the no-knock law, removed. And I'd be glad to be a sponsor on the other side in January to make sure that goes through, to fight for that, because for somebody to just be able to just run inside your home without warning and release gunfire on you, and at this very moment have no repercussions for the actions that they had, is not right. And it's something that we have to be aware of, that can still happen even right now in the state of Tennessee. And so things like that. And as a Black man myself, it's harmful and hurtful, both to see that our legislators' priorities are not on making sure that all Tennessee manner possible, regardless of whether that's COVID, whether that's criminal justice, but just to know that we have people in office right now who don't feel like our voices matter. Even going back to the representative that's in the seat right now in District 90, he voted to criminalize protesters for having a voice at the Capitol. And it's disappointing to know that another Black man would want to criminalize voices fighting for Black lives. And so Obviously, we have a lot of work to do. There's so many different ways that we can make some change happen. And criminal justice is definitely going to be a hot topic in January when legislation opens back up.
Yeah, it's definitely sure to come up in the legislature, and hopefully we can get something passed. Unfortunately, I'm not too optimistic in the GOP majority, but hopefully there's room to compromise. So I want to ask another question here. We saw in the presidential primary, many of the presidential candidates adopt Black agendas. And there were a few candidates throughout the state too that did this as well. So I want to know, what does a Black agenda look like in Tennessee? Because yes, there's criminal justice reform that can be done, but it's a lot more than that as well. So Torrey, I want to get your thoughts on this.
Oh, absolutely. It's way more than just the criminal justice side of it. I was looking back just a moment ago at wages, in the state of Tennessee across this board. A lot of people actually benefited more by being on unemployment due to COVID than they were at just being working people. And so that's a problem in our state. I think that goes directly to the disenfranchised, the African American community, to how we take care of our people. And so wages is a huge thing for us. And I definitely would fight towards increasing the minimum wage here in the state of Tennessee. I think that also healthcare, we're not able to access the healthcare that we need to be able to get to. And so whether that be, a lot of times people think of just the medicine that we need, but there's the mental health. We've went through, this has been a very traumatic year for a lot of people. And so mental health is needed here. And so we've got to expand our healthcare. Medicaid has to be expanded. We have over 282,000 uninsured or underinsured Tennesseans who don't have the necessary healthcare that they need. And I think that all connects back to the racial issues that we have going on. So I'll stop with that.
Yeah. Jenn, I want to get your thoughts on this too. A Black agenda is, key to just the state in general. It's 17% of Tennessee, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but is African American. And we need to have a plan to help out where, systemic racism has cut deep into the state. So what are some ways that you think that as a legislature you would want to target these areas?
Yeah, I would, echo what Torrey said, and also hand in hand with increasing or improving health outcomes, because we have a huge racial disparity when it comes to health outcomes in our state. If you look at even motherhood and infant mortality rates, overall our rates are atrocious here in Tennessee, but for Black women and Black babies, it's even worse. And so, improving healthcare, improving access to healthcare, making sure families have paid sick leave and paid time off for family leave, either, for both mothers and fathers, or if you need to care for an elderly relative. So improving access to healthcare, like Torrey said. I would also say there's, an environmental justice component, which Marquita Bradshaw has championed her whole life. The neighborhoods that African Americans tend to live in are often located near, toxic dumps or, factories that put pollutants into the air. And so we need to look at that. There's, a huge environmental justice component of improving the livelihoods of African Americans in our state. And, public education, funding public education, making sure there are equitable resources in communities of color. We see in COVID-19, is having a greater impact on African American and Latinx communities. And so we need to address all of those issues. And it just seems like the Tennessee legislature that we have right now, they just don't care. That's how it feels to me. And, it's really sad and disheartening that they're willing to leave so many people out in the cold. And it's past time that we have voices on Capitol Hill that are speaking for everyone, not just some.
Yeah. And I feel your frustration with that when it feels, like they don't care. We return to the same, few legislative agendas every year. We have a slate of hate in the state. We've got hospitals closing, people dying from lack of health care, but we're going to keep returning to fight women's access to health care, to fight, voter rights, all these horrible things. So we've kind of talked about some very deep topics now. So I kind of want to break that up to go to our favorite part, where we ask the candidates to ask each other a question. So this is a chance for you all to ask whatever you want the other candidate. We're all about building up the party here and getting to know one another. So yeah, I'd love to hear what, Jenn, you have to ask Torrey.
Okay. Torrey, what has been your favorite part about campaigning so far?
Actually, so my favorite part thus far, and I guess it's because I ran once before, is always going to be door knocking. A lot of times people think that because of COVID that we can't do any door knocking, but we can. And so I've basically proven that it actually works. We have door knocked from the beginning. We've been in this race over a year now at this point. And so now with COVID going on, you just knock on the door, you step back 6 to 10 feet, and you have a conversation with your voters, and it's actually working. So I think that is probably my favorite part of running for this seat, for sure.
Perfect. Yeah, I've missed door knocking a lot. So Torrey, what question do you have for Jenn?
Jenn, I know you have a family. How have you incorporated your family into your campaign?
I drag my kids around to go do lit drops and, teach them how to hang the door hangers and we've done some videos. They like to hold up the signs and say, "Vote for mommy." And so that sort of thing. So, and they're actually bummed that they can't vote for me. So, but I'll be bringing them to the polls. We always do that. We go and we vote as a family. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Great. Yeah. I always like to see what the candidates are going to ask each other. So kind of getting back at least to a little bit of policy questions. Climate change is, we're in the midst of a pandemic right now, but we have another external crisis that we're facing, and we're running out of time, and the state has not taken this seriously. 4 years ago, Gatlinburg experienced a once-in-a-century fire. We've seen historic floodings throughout Middle Tennessee and West Tennessee. So I'm just curious, what do you think needs to be done in order to protect Tennessee's natural environment and stem our effect or our carbon footprint in Tennessee? And I'll throw this one to you, Jenn.
Well, I had to do a lot of research because I was asked to sign the Green New Deal pledge for the Sunrise Movement. And so I really wasn't aware of what we could do on a state level because it seems like such an enormous problem, and how do you even begin to tackle it? But there are simple things that we can start doing, which, for one thing, the state government could slowly transition their fleet of vehicles to electric vehicles. We could be giving incentives and grants to companies. All of these tax breaks we're giving to companies to come here, we make sure that their buildings are, carbon neutral, or, they're offsetting their emissions by putting in solar arrays or that sort of thing. We can use incentives and community partnership programs to build solar arrays in, on brownfields, which are kind of like their land that can't be used because it was formerly polluted. And so that will help our rural communities too. And I'd really like to see more tax incentives or some sort of program that will help low and middle income people use solar power and wind power is not really feasible, but solar power, and install some panels in their housing, because that also helps defray the cost of household energy for people. And yeah, it's really frustrating that our government won't even acknowledge that it's a problem. And you have to remember too that the pandemic that we're currently experiencing is in some ways related to our environmental degradation. As natural habitats of animals are humans are going to come into more contact with animals that viruses can jump from, as the permafrost in Siberia and the Arctic areas starts to melt. All kinds of microorganisms are being exposed. So this probably isn't the last pandemic that we're going to experience in our lifetimes. And so we have to realize that everything is interrelated. And it's important that in addressing one problem, it's going to help additional problems. And, solar and wind industry is one of the fastest growing job creating industries in the country. And so there we go, we help our economy too. So yeah, we need to get started yesterday on working on this problem.
Yeah. So Torrey, we had Jerry Green on last week. She hyped up Memphis's water system. So I'm just curious, Memphis has this great public water system. What more can we do on a state level to ensure everyone has clean air, clean water, and protect us from the effects of climate change?
Yeah. So there's multiple different things that we could do. I like talking about this topic because this is the one that I'm learning so much about when it comes to just environment. And so I was telling somebody the other day who lives in DC, you all don't have the best water. Y'all's water is so hard. Our water is amazing. But we have to protect that, protecting our aquifer, for being able to come up with different ways. And we have with our legislation, they could push through legislation that would help stop the pollution that goes towards our water and our groundwater, which would greatly impact the water that is right here in our Mississippi River, right here in Memphis, Tennessee, that we receive. And so those are things that we could do. Obviously, there's recycling that we could put in place that would move our recycling from 10% to 80%. There's the electric vehicles. That's a huge piece. I live in Memphis, and I've seen a few of our electric buses. I take the bus pretty often, so that way we can better normalize public transportation, like other states do, like DC and New York. But I think that there are different ways that we could put into place legislation that would really push our environment forward. We have legislators that have tried to, and of course things get knocked down every single time, but we have to just keep supporting any bills that we possibly can that will help incentivize our energy here, from solar panels to, like I said, electric vehicles, electric buses. Hopefully one day, we'll have a rail line that goes across this state that'll help our environment as well, and help with jobs. So there's so many different ways that we could advocate for our environment and environmental justice.
Perfect. I love the idea of a rail line running all across the state. That would be perfect. These are great policy questions. These are great ways for people to get to know you. But I do want to ask questions that incorporate how we change Tennessee in this process. So you two are running in two very different areas. Big urban area compared to a more rural district. And Torrey, your district is unique too. It's one of the few districts that's solidly blue. How do we move these districts from, these strong red districts to, more purple flippable seats? And Torrey, I'll let you start on this.
Yeah, so our biggest thing that we could do is our census. If you haven't done the census, definitely do it. It's been extended multiple times to make sure that as many people can do it can. And I believe that is a great start in our state, is getting that census done. It makes a huge difference when it comes to the funding that we receive, what your communities receive as far as resources. But that census is so important. Obviously, I live in a district that is, like you said, very much so blue. However, because the rest of our state, a large part of our state, is so red, when it's time to redraw these districts, it's a great chance that they may try to draw me out. It wouldn't be the first time that this district has been drawn out. It didn't belong to the current representative always. They took this one, and I think they sent the real district over to across the state to East Tennessee. And so, you know, there's things that we can do to stop that, and the census is one of them. And so I'm hoping that everybody kind of fights for that and advocates for it. And, you know, although we can't register any more voters right at this very moment to affect the election, we definitely can register people to get involved in this census. That is very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Please fill out your census if you haven't already. We need to make sure everyone gets counted. So Jenn, you are in a area that tends to be red. But, you know, we've seen some of these areas, you know, increase Democratic turnout. How do you think we can get more areas like this to start to change?
That's such a tough question. And, you know, piggybacking on what Torrey said, the people we elect in this election to the state legislature are going to be drawing the district maps. So it's important that it's not gerrymandered by Republicans to suit their needs. We need to have Democratic voices in there, making sure that we have fair representation in our districts. And it's really interesting in Williamson County, because of the growth that we're experiencing, we're looking at maybe having even a fourth district, depending on how our census figures play out and who's in charge of the legislature. So, you know, that means things are being cut up even more. And it's really just a matter of getting people to understand that these things have a serious impact on your way of life. It impacts how your schools are funded. It impacts how your roads are. You know, one of the major problems we're having here is infrastructure because of the growth. We don't have, you know, traffic is a nightmare because we have 2-lane highways running through what used to be a rural area, but is now a highly developed, you know, subdivision. So yeah, we just have to keep pushing people to realize that your vote matters, your local officials matter, and you need to participate in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And to participating in the process, I think one of the things we've seen is that rural areas have, you know, kind of, you know, for lack of a better word, they've kind of fallen apart a little bit. You know, we're not seeing as many people step up to run. We've got currently 41 seats that ran unopposed. So all the GOP members are just getting to waltz right back in to the General Assembly. I think that's going to be a big problem. So how do we re-engage with people that probably 10 years ago used to vote Democratic and now have either just stopped turning up to vote or have switched parties? And Jenn, I'll let you start with that one.
Well, you know, it's hard for people to pay attention to politics when they're just trying to keep food on the table and pay their bills. And I can't really blame them for that. Part of it is that everyone needs to be reinvesting in these communities instead of having this, you know, basically everyone's, you know, when kids graduate from high school in rural communities, usually they have to leave in order to find jobs. There needs to be better, more balanced economic development throughout our state, rather than clustering that development around Middle Tennessee and certain areas. And part of it stems from, you know, local parties too. I know our Williamson County Democratic Party has really stepped up in the past few years in trying to get people more engaged and letting people know that there are alternatives out there. And yeah, there needs to be, you know, every election cycle we hope to have a little bit of progress, right? And we just keep building on that momentum, that even if, you know, this election doesn't pan out for me the way I hope it will, at least if we have a larger percentage of vote share, we'll see, people will start to see that there are people who think differently and have different solutions to the problems. And maybe the GOP will start listening too at that point. So, but yeah, we really need investment in rural areas. And it's frustrating because until we get more Democrats in the office to do that, I don't think there's going to be a change.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hit on something there that I thought was important too, and that was rebuilding your local parties, because I think that is going to help a lot, because they're actually on the ground. They can be out, they can mobilize, they can find people, and they can recruit people, and it would just help. If you're looking for something to do, I urge you to go visit your county party, because there's something definitely there. To do in your community. Torrey, I kind of want to rephrase this question a little differently, because your district is different. How do we engage young people who tend to be apathetic about the political process? Because they tend to be the crux of, or one huge voting block for Democrats, but they also don't vote in large numbers. So how have you been engaging with younger voters, and what do you think is a good way to do that in the state?
Yeah. We're very, very much so distracted right now by what's going on nationally. When you have a person sitting in the White House who isn't necessarily the best person, the attention is on all the things that he's doing crazy, or the different things that he's doing wrong, and so that does draw the attention of young people. They're like, okay, what is going on? How can I get involved? We've definitely seen an increase in the involvement from our young people in our area for sure. But what happens is we only engage people, and not to just say just young people, but we only engage people when it's time to get ready and vote again. And we have to do a better job at making sure we're teaching, training, keeping people up to date on what's going on with politics or in their lives on a regular basis, and not just wait until the last 9 months before the next election. And so that is what we have to do a whole lot better on. There's a lot of us out here, we'll go to a meeting and it'll be the same people at the meeting that you saw at the last one. We've got to start bringing more people on board, teaching people how this process works. There's a lot of young people who want to get engaged in the civics process within their local party, within their communities. They just don't know how. They don't know who to reach out to. It's actually the reason why I ended up getting in the race in the first place, is because I wasn't able to get in touch with my representative. I never could find him. I couldn't hear from him. And I wanted to learn more and just shadow him. I wasn't necessarily at that point even interested in thinking about running for office. But when we have people who do not want us to be involved, who just wait and say, you'll vote, just vote, make sure you vote. We are really big on pushing, go out and vote, but we're not big on pushing, this is who you vote for and why. These are the people running for office, and here's why. And then we also, going back to your point earlier about, we have over 40 seats that went untouched because we didn't put someone in the races. We didn't put someone, but when we do put people in the races, we have to be able to give them some type of support. And as Democrats, we don't always have the money to do what the counterparts can do, and so financially, but what we can do is provide our time and our support to candidates when we're running for office or trying to show somebody the way. And so I think at that point, young people want to get involved in that. We have the text banking system, thank you, and people really, really enjoy that. That's something that young people don't mind doing because they don't have to sit on the phone and talk. We don't mind texting. And so I say we because I still fall in that category. And so we really enjoy that. So there's different things that we can get them involved in, and we just have to provide them access to it and not wait till the last minute. So.
Absolutely. I think, we always think of election cycles as like months before the election, when actually, as soon as this election ends, yes, of course, take a break. But, come January, we've got a whole 2 years before we're back in the same place again. And that's where we can build ground. So we're getting to the last 10 minutes here. So I want to take the chance, kind of end on a happy note here. I want to know what makes you all hopeful that we can actually change Tennessee. So Torrey, I'll let you start with this.
I have a lot of hope in Tennessee. And even as someone who has ran for office before, typically what happens, people run and they're like, oh, I'm just gonna, let someone else, I'm hanging up my hat, I'm letting somebody else do it. But I have so much hope that Tennessee can change and that it will change. We have great people in the legislature. Leader Camper You have Representative Stewart. You have people all the way across this entire state doing great things and making huge changes, but they need that additional support. And so I'm hoping that we can break the supermajority in our state to get that support out there. But I'm extremely hopeful that one day the other side of the aisle will say, you know what, maybe people do really need healthcare and we can push for the expansion of Medicaid. I'm hoping that maybe they're like, well, you know what, I'm tired of paying for this resource and service. And so maybe we should change our criminal justice system to allow people the opportunity to better their lives. You know, I'm very hopeful that things can change. I'm even more so hopeful because, you know, this state, again, has not always been solid red. We can definitely get back to purple at some point, blue, but that's going to take some time. And we just have to be able to say, you know what, I'm going to offer my service and my time to make sure that that happens. I want to have children in this state one day. They need to be able to go to a school where they feel like they're getting the best education, and where I can feel as a parent that they are getting the best education. I feel very hopeful and that the state of Tennessee is going to get to where it needs to be. We have an amazing slate of candidates running for office. We really need to be able to support them all the way across the state of Tennessee, but we also have a president and a vice president that we also need to be able to get behind as well. At this point, we just really need to support each other to win this election in November. So I think we can, and I'm just going to stay hopeful.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm right there with you. You got to stay hopeful. Jenn, what makes you hopeful that we can change Tennessee?
You know, honestly, I think it's just interacting with the next generation coming up. The Tennessee Young Democrats have been phenomenal, and even the Williamson County Young Democrats have been so supportive of every candidate that we have running right now. They're volunteering their time. A lot of them are not even old enough to vote yet, but they're helping us text bank and phone bank and lit drop because they care and they want to see change. And I think they're having conversations with their families too. And they're going to be driving some of the change that we start to see in this state. And yeah, I'm so grateful for all of their support and their energy, and it keeps me going. And this past few weeks, I've been delivering yard signs throughout my county, which, as I mentioned before, it's typically a red county, but I'll tell you, Biden-Harris signs are outnumbering Trump's-Pence signs almost 2-to-1. And people, you know, traditionally have always thought we're, you know, there's very few Democrats in Williamson County, and we're always afraid to kind of, you know, raise our hands and say, yeah, actually, I support Democratic values. But people are not afraid to speak their minds this year. And unfortunately, we're seeing some of that blowback. There was a rally this past weekend, a conservative freedom rally, where there was some ugliness and racial slurs used. And you know, people, I think people on that side, in that frame of mind, they're feeling threatened because they're seeing the tide start to turn. And so they're acting out like the bullies that they are. But it takes the rest of us to stand up to that type of behavior and those attitudes and just say, no, not in our state. We're not going to have it. And, you know, part of the reason I'm running is because I want my kids to grow up in a state that is equitable and inclusive, and you know, everyone has an opportunity to live lives of dignity in safe and healthy communities. And I think people realize that the government could be doing more to make sure that happens for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're exactly right. We need to do all of this together and unite, and we can change our state. So I want to go ahead and let you all close out. Let people know where they can find you, where they can follow you, and where they can volunteer for your campaign. So Jenn, I'll let you go first.
Well, my website is jennfoley.com, Jenn with 2 N's, and you can sign up to text bank, phone bank, and lit drop. And I have an ActBlue donation button there too. I also have social media accounts on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, so you can follow along and get the latest news. Right now, I'm focused more on getting out the vote and reaching as many voters as we can. Thanks to Change Tennessee, we've been able to, I think we've texted about 13,000 voters in the past 2 weeks, or 2 or 3 weeks. So it's been really phenomenal that we've been able to reach out to so many people. So yeah, jump in and let's get this done.
Perfect. We were happy to provide that service. Torrey, where can people find you, follow you, get involved in the campaign?
Yeah, so Torrey Harris, you can go and find me on any social media platform from Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can send me an email to info@torreyharris.com. I love checking my emails, love to respond to those. You can sign up to volunteer, to text bank, to canvas for us, and to do thank you cards even. And so we have a lot of different ways that people can get involved. You can even donate if you just don't have the time and you just want to throw a few dollars our way. Definitely do that. We have Act Blue, where you can go to that website, actblue.com/donate/Torrey Harris. We have any ability that you would like to get involved and learn the political process. We don't mind teaching as well while we're doing this process, because at some point someone else is gonna have to step up and do it too. So all the support is needed, and I hope to see a lot of people at the polls.
Perfect. Yeah. Wonderful. Everyone, please go donate to Jenn and Torrey's campaigns. We definitely need their voices in the General Assembly. I've dropped links to both their Act Blues in the comments section, as well as the entire list of our endorsed candidates, where you can find them there as well, and with donation links also. That is changetn.vote/candidates. I want to thank Jenn and Torrey for joining us tonight. This has been a wonderful conversation. I'm happy to have you all running for office, and thank you to everyone that has watched, and everyone enjoy the rest of their evening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you all. That was perfect.
Yay, that was really good. It was a great conversation.